Hey folks, welcome back to the Braai Brus. I think it's February the last time we did this. Byron's been pretty busy over there at Morning Shot. I've been pretty busy here in the U.S., what with the refugee stuff that came up and then my trip to South Africa. So we did do a conversation in PE when I was down that way, and both of us got rubbished a little bit for that conversation. So I don't know if you want to have another conversation, but Byron, welcome back. It's time for the Braai Brus. How's it going today?
Conversation, I'm afraid. That conversation got spicy for absolutely no reason whatsoever. But you and I both know sometimes people just hear what they want to hear. So there's not everyone. That's usually only a small amount of very vocal people, but it is what it is.
Well, but also, I think some people tried to create some rubbish between the two of us there, saying we had some sort of dispute. I don't even know what they're talking about. I didn't have any dispute. So anyway.
Yeah. We'll avoid that. We'll avoid that conversation. Unfortunately, as you and I both know, South Africa is a little bit problematic in terms of politics at the moment, with many people wishing for things to be a certain way, and if you suggest that they might not be that way, then it gets people very upset. We're at one of those peculiar points in South African history, I'm afraid.
Indeed. So, I don't know. I don't know if it's a significant event or not, but this interesting little thing. Mr. Ramaphosa came to Washington last week. Pretty sure you saw that. I'm sure you've analyzed that as well. I covered it live. I thought it was interesting here. I thought the best moment for me, I don't know about you, but I'll give you a chance a moment. But to me, the best part was like, Mr. President, have they told you where this is at? I've never seen this before. And then Trump says, it's in South Africa.
Yeah, so you'll be very happy to note that I considered actually live streaming it, and I actually considered live streaming it with Ramon of all people. I thought that would get the audience a kick, but I decided not to because I know that people get quite a good bump on it, and I saw you did get a good bump on it. So congratulations, you're not far from 100,000 subs now. Soon you'll have one of these budget YouTube plaques. They're not the size they used to be, by the way.
Yeah, they look a lot smaller than they used to be.
They are a lot smaller. So you'll get one of these budget plaques that when you actually look at them on like the video, they look like quite nice presented, but they're actually like the cheapest aluminium over what I can only describe as polystyrene. It's proper budget, but you'll have one soon, and they look lovely in the back.
I don't know if I'll receive it. I've long time had my address as Latuli House, Johannesburg. It might be delivered there.
Well, I mean, in fairness, the ANC kind of deserve it, right? Because it's the ANC that have got you the plaque in terms of the politics. So
well, them and Malema. So yeah.
Or maybe you can have them split it in half and send one half to him and one half to the ANC.
Yeah, I'm going to have to rethink my plan. My plan was I told people when it arrives, I'm going to go out in the woods here with my 12 gauge. And I'm going to blow the smithereens out of it, bring it back and show it to everybody because my anger at YouTube's shadow bang over the years. But I mean, if I use a shotgun against something that's that poorly, flimsily made, I might not have anything left to bring back to show anybody. So I'm going to have to change those plans.
You really aren't. You really aren't. If you've got a 2.2, that might be a better idea. It might survive a 2.2. Maybe a pellet gun. It's pretty flimsily made.
I get a pellet gun. Yikes. Anyway, well, we haven't chatted since I've been back. You've been pretty busy. I've been pretty busy. I think both of us have made some content for the Truth Report, which isn't up for the platform yet, but the YouTube channel has been putting some videos other than Rob's up this week, I noticed.
Yeah, so Rob's currently doing some rounds around the US. He's getting himself on all the top podcasters, if you will. And I don't think Rob was expecting some of the feedback he's getting. So Rob isn't actually very well liked at the moment in the South African, let's call it them South African establishment. I'm trying to move away from the acronym of South African government and moving more towards the South African establishment, because as you and I both know, that the establishment these days is more than the government. It's the media, it's the NGOs, it's the overall apparatus of the state now. It's not just some guys sitting in a ministry somewhere. But anyway, the South African establishment, whether it be the media class or whatever else, is not very keen on Rob at the moment because he's causing what they're classing as a degree of cuck. So He's away at the moment, but he'll be back soon.
Yeah, no, he'll be on my program tomorrow morning live. That's at 9 Eastern Standard, 3 p.m. your time, before he heads back to South Africa. Yeah, I see that he hurt Penul's feelings. I caught his live broadcast this morning.
Penul, yeah.
His feelings are hurt.
Yeah, but he's been having that argument with Penul for a while now. So that actually all started out because Penul. So the story goes, I don't know how true it is, right? So I'm now engaging in hyperbole. I'm just talking like
third-hand information.
Because I heard one time from my aunt's uncle's cat who told me, and the story goes that when he first set up his studio, Rob gave him some money, and then Rob apparently had made some allusion to the fact that he had given him some money for the studio, and then he was like, "No, you didn't. I'm not bought and paid for." To which Rob said, "What's your problem just taking some money from a white guy?" And then it got a bit racist, and Rob called him a racist. And then they tried to bury the hatchet, and they went on a show together where Rob was like, "See, I'm actually sitting here in your room. I came to you. I'm not a racist. I'm fine with you. Like, what's your problem?" And he did what Ramaphosa does. He doubled down, and called Rob. Well, actually, during the meeting, I actually saw the podcast. It's actually very cordial. Nothing really major happens. I mean, they just kind of talk, and Penul's kind of like looks at the floor a little bit. But then afterwards, he attacked Rob quite a bit, and it's just kind of it's just gone downwards from there, where he's now made it his personal vendetta in life to talk down about Rob. So there is no real rationality for it. He's butthurt about something. What is he butthurt about? I really don't know, but he has really got antagonistic with Rob these days for no reason.
Well, he seems to be very angry at rich white people and ignores the rich black people who are destroying the country. Claims that AfriForm and Rob are ruining the country in the same fashion the ANC. I found that entertaining. Anyway, he came on this morning. I caught his live. I typed notes as he went along, and while he got some things correct, factually, he did get some things correct. He also got an awful lot wrong. His attribution for how the apartheid ended is really not well informed. Obviously, a product of post '94 indoctrination at South African universities.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem, Chris, and I had this conversation the other day with Adam Schrutz. Anna Schrutz. We did a very long podcast, probably the longest podcast that I've done. And as you know, I don't usually do your length of podcast, right? I mean, you have these like 3-hour long talks, but I was 2.5 hours talking to him, and it felt to me like a 30-minute chat.
Yeah.
But it was very engaging. I mean, Ernest is just one of the modern intellectuals I love to talk with. But one of the things that we both refer to is the idea now that nobody really seems to like to read anymore. This idea of a book is something confined to a library, What are libraries? Well, you'll find them in a museum somewhere. You can ask your granddad about them. He'll tell you about this thing called a library card. And as a result of that, we actually see that in the education system. Very few people have any concept at all of history. History, is one of those things that people wrote many books about from all different sides of the actual argument, trying to understand what the middle ground would be. Because as I say, history is usually written by the victors, but sometimes it's also written by the losers, and they both have their own perspective. And what's the truth? Well, somewhere in between. But unless you read both sides in order to understand what's happened, very difficult for you to actually determine anything. Well, these days, we don't even bother reading both sides. We read the crib notes that ChatGPT generated for us.
Yep.
Then we do some content on it. Then somebody does some content on our content. And then somebody does some content on our content on our content. And the actual truth is so far from people's minds now. And then they make almost political decisions or ideological decisions based on something that's, in the old days, we talk about primary versus secondary sources. These days, it's not even primary or secondary. It's like a vague mythological rumor of something that maybe happened. And it's just how it is now.
No, you're absolutely correct. Although some of us do still read. In fact, when I ended my my analysis of his commentary at the bottom of the last hour, before we started, I went to the couch, picked up my book Taking Midway by Martin Dugard. I'm near the last couple chapters and continued reading it for about 25 minutes before I came back here. So I do still read, having been a published author. But, it's funny, when I appeared on the DJ Cebu program, I was kind of surprised Nota Boloy was there. That caught me off guard. That wasn't what was supposed to happen. But anyway, neither here nor there. But the comments from black racists and supremacists about, who's this white YouTuber lecturing black South Africans? What? YouTuber? Dude, that's just a venue that I use. I'm a historian, a political scientist, a university professor, an intelligence officer. These people are just so stupid. It's beyond belief. Too lazy to even do a Google search. It doesn't take much to do a Google search. I mean, I've laid out my career on my LinkedIn profile. It's not hard to find. It's not rocket science. Yeah, but they just run their mouths because they're just stupid. There's a lot of stupid. And it's not confined to South Africa. This is global. This is a global problem.
It is a global problem, but it's a very curious problem to observe, and I like to use. If you've ever watched my podcast, you hear I use the word curious a lot because it's the least offensive way for me to say it. But really, what I want to say is it's just complete bullshit, because the reality is that if you look at things from an objective view, just slightly objective, you'll understand that when people use a title for you, it's usually in a way to categorize you in a framework. It's me setting the boundaries before I even consider the argument that you've made.
Yep.
So if I say to you, popular author and historian, I've given you a degree of authority. If I go previous or former or retired army intelligence, I've given you a degree of credibility. If I say YouTuber, I'm like, well, this is just some moron with a microphone online. Like, who the hell wants to listen to him?
Somebody eating crisp, sitting in his lawn chair.
That's right. He's equivalent to the old man around the pub, the grumpy old man who's just talking shit over a phone. And it's, as I say, it's curious. What I really mean is it's bullshit, because they did it even with Ramon and Ronaldo. I mean, you look at Ronaldo. What is he? He's a right-wing pod bro. Ronaldo was a ward councillor in Nelson Mandela Bay, serving on the council as a DA politician for a number of years.
Yep.
He was then an actual experienced ward councillor who sat on various boards in political frameworks.
Yep.
He also then got sworn into Parliament, and whilst wasn't in Parliament for a while, he was an MP. So the correct title should have been former MP.
Correct. Yep.
Right, but that not
because
right-wing pod bro.
That's his highest title. You get your highest title, and it's why when people. So Rebecca Davis tried to rubbish me in the Daily Maverick with some nonsense, and then the Newsroom Africa lied about things I said about Amanda Khuz at Stellenbosch University, saying I claimed that she said something about land. I didn't talk about land. I was talking about her lying about sanctions in South Africa, and exactly what you said. They called me, former colonel. I'm not a former colonel. That's my title. And I'm subject to recall. In fact, was nearly recalled active duty 2 years ago. But these people are just, you're right. That's what they do. They try to diminish people. You frame it. And if you want someone to be bona fides, a guest to come on, then you're gonna talk about the things that make them look authoritative. No, you're right about that. It's just, but that's just how people are. It's to me. It's ironic. The world has become so dumb and so dumbed down in the past 30 years. It's mind-boggling to me that people don't do research. They're too lazy. There's idiocy about, the Bantus were in South Africa thousands of years ago. No, they weren't. We have the archaeological, the linguistic, and the DNA evidence to prove when they arrived crossing the Zambezi and Limpopo River about 1,600 years ago, roughly. And people just don't want to believe that because it doesn't fit their narrative. It's not my narrative. I don't care when they arrived. I don't care when the Europeans arrived. You all arrived there. You all been there for generations to get over yourselves. But now they just go, no, we were here first. But you weren't. The Khoisan were there before you, and they weren't there first. Homo naledi, we found her in the cradle of humankind. She's 2 million years old. She wasn't Khoi. She wasn't San. This OG who got there first nonsense really needs to stop.
Yeah, but this to a large degree is actually a Western problem, and it's Western idiocracy, because if you think about this logically, right now in the Middle East, there are problems left, right, and center with people still taking land today, and I don't mean Israel. A good example is Cyprus right now. Saw that Northern Cyprus is occupied territory. We don't talk about it. And you know who definitely doesn't talk about it? The occupiers.
Well, Turkey doesn't talk about it at all, but I've talked about it on my program occasionally. Yep, because the peacekeeping mission is still going on.
But they're never going to talk about it because they don't feel guilty.
Yep.
But Western civilization, for whatever reason, feels guilty. And it feels the need to apologize. And rather than apologize, it feels the need to grant recognition to a fake history that never happened, so that in doing so, they can say, by recognizing a fake history that never happened, they're absolving themselves from guilt. And
it's like the Armenian genocide. The Turks don't recognize what they did.
No, but it's bizarre. I think you've just had this right now in Canada, right? So King Charles is over there and he says he recognizes that he's standing on stolen land.
Oh, please.
What the hell is that all about?
Well, then I'll tell you what. Then he stole the land from my Viking ancestors when they became English. Piss off. We owned Stamford Bridge before you did. York was a Viking settlement. Jorvik, that's what it was, not York. So piss off, English. That's ours. Stupid nonsense. I mean, look, if anybody has a claim to what is Judea today, it's the Jews. They were there 5,000 years ago. Hey, they were the OGs if we're going to play that game. Anyway, we could go back to ancient Samaria. People get silly. Hey, there's a comment here I got to address real quick. Werner Dutoy says, Colonel, what is your perspective on the English lady who got into the Afrikaner resettlement program? Well, first off, Werner, there's a few problems with your statement. There's no such thing as an Afrikaner refugee resettlement program. There's a resettlement program for South Africans, and as I predicted correctly on February 7th and every time since then, it was likely to include racial minorities. And so racial minorities would include people of English descent. Now, are you telling me that a UK national got into the program? Then we have a problem. If she's a UK national living in South Africa, but I doubt that. I believe what you're trying to say is a South African national who speaks English as a first language got in the program. Well, that's fine. It's not for farmers. It's not for white people. It's not for Afrikaners. You bought into the lies from propaganda in South Africa. I told people without any information from the U.S. government how this program was going to play out, and I was 100% correct. So I think that your premise is invalid, Werner, unless, of course, you're talking about a UK national. Then we got a different story, but I don't think that's the case. Anyway, had to just digress that because we got to shoot that down very quickly.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm generally avoiding the refugee topic. So
well, that's a good idea because it's really become quite wearing and tiresome. I've got every media outlet in the world not criticizing me at the moment because they all want access to refugees, and I'm about one of the few people that actually have trusted because I haven't abused them. So, but I'm not doing that story anymore unless someone approaches me who's worthwhile. There is one attention-seeking hoe out there amongst the refugees who is asked to come on my program, not coming on. I'm not giving attention to attention seekers. I'm just trying to help people get the truth. Anyway, so I've addressed that. Let's move on from there. But back to the White House, the Oval Office. I mean, I had my popcorn out. I don't know if you watched it, if you're watching SABC or you watched it.
I watched it live.
Okay. I had a big basket of popcorn. Some people are upset because they can hear me chewing on the microphone. Next time I'll turn the microphone off when I'm eating the popcorn. But it made for entertaining television. They call it an ambush. It wasn't an ambush. Give me a break. That wasn't an ambush.
Depends what you mean by ambush, right? I mean, this idea that he played the video footage right there on the worldwide stage. I suppose you could class that as an ambush. But actually, to a large degree, so I watched Joel Pollak's interview on this with Biz News today, and he feels that the Ramaphosa administration got off rather lightly. He says that they didn't tackle him as publicly as they thought he would. But I made a number of videos around the actual thing of what had happened. But I'd rather not comment on the actual event. I'd rather comment on what happened afterwards.
Well, you mean the propaganda blitz that was prepared by the ANC, which is nothing but lies. But go ahead.
I'm more interested in what happened when the ANC go home, because there was an opportunity for the ANC almost to do a form of reset or relook at priorities, and three things happened that were really, you see, picking up on my terms already, curious. The first is that Ramaphosa was asked if he would denounce the singing of the song, to which he said no.
He lied to Trump. He said he had renounced it.
Correct. The second thing that he said was he did this whole thing where they readjusted some of the BE criteria around Starlink. And that went through to the relevant communications portfolio committee, who absolutely lost their mind and said that the minister couldn't do that because it was, racist and whatever else. And so as a result, now they're trying to do the thing through Parliament where they're trying to shoot it down. And I'm just like, again, so you look at that and you go, right, okay, so one of the things that they asked you to be was a little bit more logical on, and I'm not going to say South African interest, because it was clear that the Trump administration was attempting to get better trade relations between it and the US. It was more interested in its trading position than South Africa's human rights, but that's just my opinion. And that's now not happening because the ANC just can't bring itself to do any form of reform. And the third thing that then happened, which is currently happening, is that he then had an argument with Corné Mulder in his last speech where they were doing questions and answers, actually around BEE. And he said, until we're all equal, the race categorization is going to continue and BEE will continue. In which case it's going to continue forever, because we're never going to be equal in the way the ANC envisages it.
Yeah, no, I think the points that validate your position on your argument that they were more concerned about trade than they were concerned about the issues in South Africa that affect South Africans. Number one, when asked about a genocide, now all the media lie. Trump was asked directly a question. He says, "I'm not convinced there's a genocide." So that was his response. He never used the term genocide. He said, I'm not convinced of that when he was asked it. So that, obviously, if they were pushing that issue, then they would have spent more time on it. Number two, Trump has said that, they're considering coming to the G20. It looks like they'll come to the G20. So, I mean, obviously, that is not focused on the issues for South African human rights and concerns like that. And there are a couple other points there that make your point. Now, that's what we saw in front of the cameras, which ended rather abruptly as they went off to lunch finally because of the 30-minute late start. We don't know what happened behind the cameras. Daily Maverick claims to have two South African sources, a U.S. source, and I think it's a carefully orchestrated propaganda campaign to pretend that this went well. It didn't go well. I can read Donald Trump's body language. He was not a happy camper at the late start. Whoever's responsible for that, whether it was South African delegation, Secret Service, U.S., I don't know.
The news was South Africa, actually. The news was that Cyril arrived late, according to what I've heard.
Well, if in fact
Which
that's true,
me,
yeah, then you could see why. You could see Trump was steamed when he arrived. That was not a warm welcome. Very pissed. His demeanor was very, very angry. I know, because I often intentionally show my emotions like that to make a point to people without saying a word. And then in the meeting, Trump wasn't convinced of anything. So what happened behind closed doors? I'm not buying for a second the claims by Daily Maverick about their sources. I think they're just making nonsense up. Anyway, but I agree with you that in front of the cameras, it wasn't about white genocide. It wasn't about farmers, although that was shown to refute nonsense because but it was really about we're trying to improve the position here, and the South African government doesn't want to improve the position. They went back and did the things that completely undermine the position. It's idiocy of the highest order. I mean, it's just they think they can act domestically one way and play, and do a minstrel show to the rest of the world. It doesn't work. The jig is up.
Unfortunately, this is a common thing with the ANC in South Africa. There's been numerous articles written on it, and one of the articles written by Politics Web suggested that the ANC has two faces, as what they call the international face, where in the international face they try to look, very reasonable and approachable and whatever else, and then there's the local level, which is basically them in their, let's call them their Soviet colors. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. And they don't want to show their Soviet colors to the rest of the world because the rest of the world will think of them as old, antiquated, and a bit dwarf, which is very similar to what Andre de Ruyter said in his book. He said you'd go into these meetings and you'd feel cringe. But he then said, obviously, then there's this international thing where they go around and they try to, seem like they're part of the international community. And they're not. The reality is that I think the biggest problem they had, especially when they were in the Oval Office, is that they wanted to show people their, let's call it the international face. They didn't want to show them the Soviet type face. And Trump was like, I hear you. Let me just show you the video. Then he showed them the video, and that's why they called it an ambush, right? Because they were like, Ramaphosa even tried to do something that I thought was rude. they asked the question directly of Donald Trump. What would it take?
I'll take this. I'll take this question.
That's right.
What he should have done. What he should have done is, Mr. President, do you mind if I answer this question? Is that okay? Yeah, because he was the guest in the Oval Office. Oof.
Correct. But you see, he wanted to set the tone because he wants to set it in that. Remember that international thing. This is my international, the Mandela look, and Trump, and he was like, I'm going to take that.
And then he did exactly what, Rob Hersoff did a video calling on Trump to take action. I did a video calling on the South African delegation to not do certain things. One of those was not to lecture Trump. And what did he do? He lectured Trump. If only he'll listen to the whiteys we brought with us. Oh.
Yeah, but I mean, the whiteys he brought with him as well were a bunch of morons. I mean, he brought, Johan Rupert, and he was like, what was that all about? Because Johan just sat there. He treated Lamola like he was his garden boy.
I did see that. That was true.
The only guy I actually thought that did a really good job there was Retief. That's it. Because Retief, when he asked Retief, what's your experience? He goes, there are farm murders on my property, and I know people that have been attacked, and we live behind, walls and whatever else. Like, he just said it straight. But he didn't do it in an aggressive manner, which was like, it sucks. He's still like, I love being in South Africa and I love being a farmer. So that degree of honesty was nice.
I don't understand why people don't see that from Ernie Els. Ernie Els said, you don't fix one wrong with another wrong doing this, and he talked about what actually happened. The only thing that he did, I think, that undermined his argument is he pulled out his passport. I'm still a South African. See, I still carry this. But I mean, they spend a lot of time in the States, those two. So I mean, I thought Ernie Els did very well, but it seems like a lot of South Africans don't see that. I saw something very different. So anyway.
I don't know. I thought it was a little bit cringe with him pulling out that stupid.
No, that was cringe. But I mean, the rest of it was pretty good. But anyway, no, it was just ridiculous. And Steenhuisen, oh my goodness. Oof. Sorry, John. Sorry, the DA's
John
dead.
was just John, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was just being himself. The DA's dead. He's not getting it. Not getting the bigger picture. The DA, I'll tell you, the number of people that are angry at the DA because of that, and then all the other things on top of it. And then we see Jack Miller tossed out by what's her name there, Purchase. In Cape Town, the DA is going to do some serious damage control very soon if they want to survive.
Yeah, but I also see it slightly differently, right? I mean, I worked for a former diplomat, as you know, and I know that he was there as, you got to remember, he wasn't there as the leader of the opposition, right? He was actually there as the minister in the president's cabinet, and so he did actually have a very diplomatic role to play, and he had to be diplomatic, and so he was trying to be diplomatic without being aggressive, and what everybody wanted him to say is, no, there's all these racial relations and South Africa sucks and blah, 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 blah.
No, I didn't want him to say that. I didn't want him to say that, and I was a diplomat for years, so I had worked in multiple embassies. So from my perspective, yes, he was diplomatic, but he added nothing to the conversation. He was trying to make the point that, we joined this government, it's a reasonable government so that we keep these radicals out. Well, the problem with that is that South Africans know the truth. And nothing has changed. Their policies have been implemented and are being implemented. BEE, Bella, the black tax, NHI, expropriation, they're all there. The DA has had no influence whatsoever with changing anything. And to be fair, yes, and I cover this, Bella was passed before this government took effect. It was signed, and the same with EWs. All that was passed, but if they had influence with Ramaphosa, they could have convinced him not to sign these things. But they didn't. So they have no influence whatsoever. So, I from U.S. standpoint, it was no harm. It wasn't bad what he did. But from a domestic standpoint, I'm looking at this, and that's why so many South Africans are angry, because they're like, that's not what he should have said. We joined this government to keep the radicals because all the radical policies are in place. So I get what you're saying. He was diplomatic. He didn't step on his crank in that respect. But from a domestic standpoint, I think he very much stepped on his crank.
Yeah, but I think there's also a problem, though, with him saying that, because one of the issues that Ramaphosa has identified, and whether or not you agree with him or not, is almost immaterial. There is a degree where it's true. And Ramaphosa says these aren't laws signed in this administration, or they weren't agreed by Parliament in this administration. They were done in the last administration, and he's enacting them because he is president of the state, he has to do it. Now, I know that all the counter arguments will be sending them back to redrafting and all the stuff, the prerogative of the president. I know that. But What he's saying, Ramaphosa that is that these things were all voted on in the last parliaments, and so it's not like the process to adopt them in his head. What he's saying to people is that it was undemocratic, and somehow these things are all being done underneath Steenhuisen's watch. They're not being done under Steenhuisen's watch because these things were not voted for underneath Steenhuisen's watch. And that is true. And like I say, I know all the counter arguments. I know where that could go. But a lot of people, and I spoke to the prince, Prince Adil, Grand Prince of the Paddies, and he called me up when they did this whole government national unity. He says, I think the ANC are stupid. Why are they doing this? Their voters are going to kill them. And I said to the prince at the time, I thought it was genius on the behalf of the ANC. And he said, why? I said, because I worked for the Minister of Transport underneath David Cameron's government. There was a unity government. It was a coalition between them and the Lib Dems. That coalition destroyed the Lib Dems for all time. Like, the Lib Dems are footnotes in history now. And as I said to him, if you were the ANC and you were really worried about the DA, that's the easiest way to do it. Go into coalition with them. Everything that's good that happens is your fault. Everything that's bad everything that's bad that happened is their fault. And that's why now the DA is getting the blame for NHI or whether it be expropriation. But they weren't their legislations. They were passed in the previous administration.
It doesn't matter, though.
They're
the ones that held all the cards in this. The MK was never going to be in alliance with the ANC. Not going to happen. Zuma would have eaten that party from inside, plus the Radical Economic Transformation members who's still there. The party, it never would have happened. And then the EFF coming in never would have survived because Ramaphosa can't stomach Malema. He would have made demands too big, and it would have collapsed after just a short period if they even had a coalition. And even so, the two of them still didn't have 50%. So that's a disingenuous argument. The DA held all the cards in negotiation, and they walked away with nothing. None of the security sector, none of the security cluster, no justice, no defense, no foreign relations, no military, no police, nothing. And they didn't. All they got was inconsequential ministries from a power standpoint, but consequential for bringing services to South Africans, which the ANC is going to take credit for. Home affairs has dramatically improved. People are getting passports and things much quicker. They'll take credit for it. So, look, I mean, I think to me the scariest part, the most embarrassing part for me was when President Trump said the following. Have you met my Secretary of Housing and Urban Defense, Ben Carson? You know, he's black.
Who's that?
No. Oh, that's right. It wasn't Trump who was a racist. It was Cyril Ramaphosa. Have you met my white Minister of Agriculture? Talk about cringe moment.
I mentioned that in my video. I kept saying he kept going white. It's like
cringe.
John was the token worker.
Yeah, cringe. I mean, if Trump had said that, that would have been the headline. I'm glad you mentioned it because we must be the only two journalists on the planet who mentioned that. I mentioned it right away. I'm like, this is cringe. I mean, how do you introduce your Minister of Agriculture as your white minister? I mean, that was, if Trump did that, that would still be headlines today, 10 days later or 8 days later.
Well, he's, I think in America you call it stolen valor, right? So that's what he was attempting to do. He was attempting to use stolen valor of him saying, well, he's a waka. So I can't be against farmers because I've got a guy who's Minister of Agriculture and he's white. Like, who knew there's white people in Africa? So it was obvious that that's why he was doing it. Can I just actually answer a chat that's here? Mm-hmm. One person says that I'm turning out to be a poor mouthpiece and I must have skin in the game, or I don't know, some bollocks. Just to tell the troll in the comment section, I'm saying I understand the ANC's logic. It's sometimes important to understand what they are saying and how they frame an argument. I can't dispute an argument if I don't understand it. I can't just go, ooh, futsak ANC. Like, I need to understand what the logic behind this is in order for me to assess whether the logic holds any credibility. That's what I'm saying. I understand the logic. I'm not saying it's, as I say, I also understand the counter argument. But you've got to understand how it's being framed by the political parties. And my point remains the same. These were things passed in the previous administration, signed in this administration. When they get signed, all they have to do is say it was the DA's fault. And the DA has to take responsibility now for every policy that they don't like.
They're part of the government.
So now they're part of the government. And that's why this is a brilliant move on behalf of the ANC. Because now they go, well, don't you like NHR, and they're like, well, we've never liked it. And they're like, well, but you're part of the administration, so you have to like it. You're one of us, right? That's exactly what they're doing. It's a tactic. I'm not saying I like it. I'm not even saying it's a good one, but it's the tactic they're using.
And it's working.
That's all you have to
and
take
it's
from
working.
it. And it's working.
Yep. And I mean, that's what I've been saying since they entered this agreement. And then, of course, the whole thing has been a fraud from the beginning because this was an agreement between the ANC and DA, and all these idiots in the ANC talking about, kick the DA. You can't kick the DA out. It's an agreement between the two parties. And then the ANC illegitimately went behind the back of the DA and invited 8 other parties to join to give themselves top cover. That's not even legitimate. This is a coalition between the ANC and DA. The rest are just strap hangers. They should all go into opposition and get out of it. But the DA, they negotiated from a position of strength and walked away with nothing. And look, I mean, okay, now I'm going to rubbish somebody because I found very disgusting because a friend of mine's mother was nearly murdered on a farm 2 nights ago. And this one irritated the hell out of me. Watching Ramaphosa walk into that conference laughing about dim the lights, and there's Dean Macpherson. What the hell is that? What the hell is that? The security guards weren't laughing. Why was he laughing? He's a butt kisser, to say the least. I mean, what a disgrace. Making light of the torture and murder of people. This is vile and repulsive. I expect it from Ramaphosa, and he tried to make light of it before. Look, he's mocking President Trump. Does he think this is going to go well for him? It's not.
I think it's a difficult position that, Dean is... I don't think it's just Dean. I think it's all of the ministers, apart from Leon Schreiber, who seems to be a bit immune from this, but he's not in the public limelight. He's not doing what some ministers like to do, and that is they use their portfolio to bolster their own personal profile as opposed to bolster the portfolio itself. And I could name politicians I think that are just like that. But Minister for Health is a really good example. Like, he's constantly going on about his wishes and his desires and what he thinks, and you're like,
and Ramaphosa, my government, yeah.
and there's people that are clearly using their positions to bolster their profile. With that being said, Leon Schreiber, I think, is kind of immune from that. But I think Dean started off in, and I know Dean personally, right? So, Dean, if you're watching, sorry, but it's just my opinion. But
I don't know.
Dean started off as being that person. I'm there to bolster the portfolio, and he talked about making South Africa a construction site, and he said all the right tones. But then you got quite a lot of attention because he's now in charge of the very thing that the DA hated the most, which is expropriation without compensation. That's in his portfolio, and in a way, that's almost genius because these guys hate this idea, and so you make them in charge of it. And now all of a sudden he's been bolstered up with a higher profile, and he's kind of jumped on that. He's now using the portfolio to service his profile. He said, as long as I'm minister in this portfolio, I'm never going to expropriate anything. And then it was actually, maybe expropriation's not that bad. And then it was, nil is actually a form of compensation.
What kind of horseman is that? I'm confused.
And so,
I'm confused. I mean, sorry, Byron, but I'm confused. I mean, Dean Macpherson. Am I wrong? Is English not his first language? Is he not of Anglo descent? Maybe he's got some Boer in him. I don't know. But I mean, Dean Macpherson, I would think that he understands that the two words nil, which means nothing, and compensation, which means to get something in exchange for something, are incompatible. You can't say nil compensation. It's an oxymoron. Am I missing something?
No, you're not. But and the point I would say here is that Dean has successfully cocooned and graduated, in my opinion, from being a DA, I'm going to be here for my portfolio, to an ANC, I'm here for my portfolio, for my portfolio to boost my profile. I think he's successfully become an ANC guy. That's what I think.
Yeah, I don't dispute that.
I personally, in the current guys, feel, based on what I'm seeing currently, and maybe both of us are getting this wrong, right? And we just misunderstand the guy. But
I don't think so.
I think he could easily join the ANC tomorrow as a minister, and nobody would blink an eye.
I think John could too. Both of them can.
As much as I hate to say it, I think I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah. I mean, and
Completely.
I don't know what the DA is trying to accomplish here. They're not stopping anything, and they're going to take all the credit for stopping the VAT, but they weren't the only ones fighting against the VAT. And they also didn't take the quickest route to the VAT, which was to get 1/3 of Parliament to oppose it and go to the Constitutional Court, which would have had to render a decision within 30 days. We wouldn't have had to go through all this nonsense and wasted lawyer fees. It would have gone to the Constitutional Court just like that. But nope, nobody did that. Only the Freedom Front Plus made a feeble effort at it to get, and they could have got it. It only took, convincing Bosa to join to get this thing declared unconstitutional. That's what the law says, but no one even tried it. Of course, Ramaphosa tried to circumvent the law by signing it in December, then pretending to sign it at Davos, but that's a whole other story. Anyway. Yeah.
It's weird what's happening with the DA, but what I do know from insiders in the DA is that many people are unhappy with John's leadership because they do feel he has done exactly what we've said, right? He's graduated, become an ANC guy. And there's a lot of debate as to what that would mean if John was no longer leader of the party, like who takes over. And I think I've said it before. I'm going to repeat it here on your show. I think the ANC and the DA both have the same problem. The same problem. That is a lack of credible potential leadership who could take over after. And I know some people say to me, oh, you could get Jordan Hill-Lewis to take over. It's like, one, he's too young. Two, he wants to be the mayor of Cape Town. He wants to stand a second term. And then you start looking around it. So you go, okay, well, Leon Schreiber. My answer to that would be, it's too white. And he still lacks experience. And then you go, okay, well, who next?
Nobody knows who Andrew Whitfield is, so it won't be him.
And Andrew Whitfield in the Eastern Cape at the moment is not in the good books of the Eastern Cape legislature. In fact, they're actually trying to get rid of him out of there because there's all sorts of kerfuffle there. So you go, okay, well, in the actual the DA's leadership itself, like, who have you got? Are we going to get Macpherson? Well, I don't think so. Again, too what? So you got what? Maybe the lady who's currently standing as Minister of Basic Education, maybe her, but she was the former chief whip. I've met her. She's very pleasant, very nice. Is she presidential material? No. So who have you got? And the answer would be
Helen. She's passed it.
Helen, and she's passed it.
Yep.
So who have you got?
A weak bench. And you're right. I think they have a weak bench. It's unfortunate. Yeah, well, I mean, look, this isn't, I have people that come on and make ridiculous comments. I'm anti-DA. I'm not anti-DA. I'm the person that told people to vote for the DA in the municipal elections 2021. This is the best chance to take over municipalities. I've never been anti-DA. And I also have sources in the DA who are senior who are also very unhappy with Steenhuisen. They may be the same, may be different sources, I don't know, but not anti-DA, but very disappointed. And unfortunately, exactly what I predicted was going to happen last year when they entered this thing, because they got nothing of consequence. If they gotten justice, if they gotten foreign affairs, Darko, then yeah, maybe it had a different game. But the ANC is running the country as if they're the majority party with the willing accomplices in the GNU. They're not changing anything. In fact, they're doubling down. No. Nothing. South Africa's not getting better. It's getting worse.
Yeah, and it's curious because I'm sure I did a YouTube short on this. I don't know if you saw the news, but the latest bullshit now is that we might lose our rights to international airspace.
Yeah, no, I saw that. I thought it was a rumor at first, but then I confirmed it was actually true because the nonsense that the government is not cooperating with information. Yep.
And it's what is it because of? Because they haven't set up an independent body that does investigations. And this is the same problem we have with grey listing. Now, I called grey listing. I'm an economist. I work in finance. I read the news. I did a video. I remember doing a video a year before South Africa was grey listed. And in it, I actually remember Ramon and I postponed releasing the video for 2 weeks because Ramon was like, this is the most bullshit story ever. It's like, it's inconsequential. And I'm like,
South Africa should have been grey listed 20 years ago. It's a conduit for terror financing and has been for 2 decades.
And so I said to Ramon, like, this is a big issue. Like, I know how big this is going to be from a finance perspective. Anyway, we sat on the story for like 2 weeks and then we released it. And then literally like a month later it was all over the news. South Africa gets grey listed and blah, 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 blah. And the format of how we got there I'm seeing the exact same thing now in the airline industry. Like this is it's history repeating itself, and the government has been asked to do something, and in typical fashion, the government will not do something, and the due date will come and go, and we are going to lose our international airspace. That's the fact of it. Let's just prepare ourselves for it, and it's through nothing more than sheer idiocracy.
Yeah, no, it's negligence, stupidity, and incompetence. That's exactly what it is. And frankly, we can apply this in so many other fields that South Africa is lacking in so many other places. I mean, if we raided international defense forces and allowed them to deploy based on their competency, there'd be no South African troops abroad, for example.
But that's another story that I suppose we can touch on. I don't know if you did. I think you did a video on this. I don't know.
I've talked about it a lot over the years. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
I try to do a lot. I do a lot of videos. Yes,
I can't keep track of all of them. But there was the story about obviously what's happening now with the South African troops in the DRC, and they've all had to surrender their weapons and go off to Rwanda, and then from Rwanda they're getting a lift home. Have you actually heard the stories of how they've been treated in Rwanda? By the way,
not very well. It's not going well.
They've been treated as war criminals.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to have a firearm on them. Yep. They have to be escorted everywhere. Dude, like, this is so embarrassing. You are walking around like a defeated army.
Well, they are a defeated army. They were defeated by a band of rebels, and badly. Did you see the videos of the way that the South African troops fire back? I mean, it's just no fire discipline to it. They got one whitey who's the NCO who's trying to calm them all down and direct their fire. Otherwise, they'd just be shooting into the sky. Total chaos. Shooting recklessly. I mean, this isn't an army. This is a rabble. And what a sad state of affairs. This was the most professional army in Africa and one of the top in the world in 1990. And look at this mess now. Sad.
Yeah, I mean, but one has to remind ourselves of what, the South African army was. I mean, it was one of the strongest in Africa, if not the strongest in Africa.
No,
now
it was.
It's been defeated in the DRC.
Yeah, by rebels. By rebels, not by a formal army.
It's terrible.
And they were also defeated by rebels in the Central African Republic at a high cost of casualties.
But we're seeing this in every single metric, right? We're seeing it in... You pick an area, and the story that we are talking about right now can be replicated over and over again.
Yeah. In every aspect of society. I mean, look at how they're losing ArcelorMittal because the rails are missing and they can't afford to pay the transport costs to bring coking coal to the steel mills. I mean, it just floods across everything. Complete destruction of the country. It's sad.
I don't see any reversal of it. That's the problem. And the reality is at this point in time, supposedly the DA kept the destructors out of power by forming this GNU, and I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the progress that they said would happen. Maybe it's just me.
No, it's not just you. It's the reality. Someone just asked a question about investing in black businesses and losing money in pension funds. We have the same nonsense happening in America where pension funds were being directed to do the ESI scores or whatever the nonsense was to invest in green energy and invest in minority businesses. Businesses that don't make money. Businesses are not a going venture. They're not legitimate. They're just propped up by subsidies and corruption. And pension funds have lost billions, if not trillions of dollars for this stupidity. Finally, we're moving away from that. Now, I never invest in that nonsense. My stock investments don't get into companies that are simply propped up by corrupt government officials. But this has happened the world over. Europeans have done it. South Africans are trying to do it now. And Americans were doing it. And now we're finally getting away from it. You should never entrust your money to somebody that decides to put money because, it's a good thing to do. Now, when you invest your money for your future, you invest where you maximize your profit at the lowest risk possible, and that's what you do. And if that means investing in cigarette companies, do it. That's what I did.
Well, exactly, right?
Because the Chinese are smoking the cigarettes. I don't care if they all die from cancer as long as I get rich. Wait, that's going to be clipped and misused.
Chris doesn't mean that he advocates for the death of Chinese, by the way. He's just saying that, he's not responsible for the life choices of others.
Yeah, right. I can't choose people's social ills. That's their problem. But if they choose to do it, it's their prerogative. It's their right to smoke. And if they want to do that, then I'm happy to invest in Altria.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
It's strange at the moment because, as you very rightly say, these policies are global, and there's all sorts of suggestions as to why they might be. And if you want the conspiracy theories, go watch Germ's channel. Like, Germ loves a good conspiracy theory. He'll tell you all the conspiracy theories, but the reality is that a lot of this comes from this idea of them trying to pursue forms of social justice. But the problem is that social justice is a value decision, and markets don't work on the basis of values. I mean, I read something the other day where somebody attempted to suggest that markets do work on values and ethics.
Supply and demand. Supply and demand.
There's no, where a person attempts to adopt forms of values and ethics in a market, markets are usually altered by forms of regulation, and the forms of regulation usually collapse a market. That's basically interfering with the market. Markets don't care about your feelings. They care about profits and losses, supply and demand. Nothing more.
Well, I mean, you can have a business model like that if you want, like Patagonia. They give a percentage of their profits to do-gooder projects, but they're only able to do that because rich white people buy their crappy clothing at elevated prices. If they were competing in a fair market where people competed for quality and for durability and price, all three of those factors, they would be bankrupt. They wouldn't be able to make money, but they make money, and they're able to give money to social causes because they appeal to rich white people, and it works because there's enough rich white people in America.
And that's exactly where I'm trying to go with this, right? So it's like, markets don't care about your feelings or your social justice or your ethics. They care about supply and demand, and they care about profit and loss. And the problem is that the markets are now being interfered with. A good example is Ben and Jerry's. Like, you constantly insert values. You constantly insert things that people say they care about. But people don't want that. You know what people want? Ice cream. That's what they want. Just give them freaking ice cream and you'll do fine. And where these things are happening, where they're forcing you to invest in ideals as opposed to market-oriented products that people actually want, it's a disaster because people don't buy ideas. They buy ice cream. And the problem is that by inserting the value, at some point you're going to have to prop that up. But you're not propping it up with money from the market through the goods that you're selling. You're artificially propping it up. And where I wanted to come with this, I'm doing all of this as a prelude, because I'm sure you've seen the news that there is South Africa's largest chicken farm, state-run, it's gone bust. And I've got to be honest, dude, you've spent time in South Africa. And this isn't meant to sound racist.
Everybody eats chicken. There should be no bankrupt chicken.
Everybody. How do you go bankrupt on chicken?
Well, because you don't know how to run a business because you run it on social nonsense instead of running it on a profit basis. That's the problem. The Vreda dairy farm, that's another example. Every one of these state-owned enterprises is a disaster. And this is why South Africa had to impose 75% tariffs on U.S. poultry imports, punishing us because they're an inept poultry industry. There should be no problem making money with selling chicken in South Africa. Chicken Lickin', KFC are on every freaking corner, in every township even. Give me a break. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Right? I still, to today, I cannot fathom how you lose money in chicken. I just can't. And then the news was that the CEO took a big bonus and then the next day resigned with immediate effect. I mean, nowhere immediate effect isn't a thing, but it basically meant I've got my money, I'm out of here. Mm-hmm. And the entire board basically resigned and said, I'm not looking after this trash. All the chickens died, and now they need like a few billion in a state bailout. Like, it's freaking chicken, dude. Like, how do you lose money in chicken in Africa?
I don't know how you lose money in chicken in Africa. Dirk Coetzee said that, or not Dirk Coetzee said, Chris Fried said, even the elephant seal in Gordons Bay was looking for KFC. No, I can definitively confirm that elephant seal was trying to apply for the refugee program, and he's being evacuated to Longabon. We're going to fly him out with a C-17 going to Charleston, South Carolina, to a FEMA aquarium, just so you know that. And by the way, he didn't have a passport, and he didn't have an unabridged birth certificate, but the elephant seal was an exception. We're taking him on. So he wasn't looking for KFC. He was looking for the refugee program. He was about 30 miles away from the consulate. He beached in the wrong place. He had bad guidance. Anyway, sorry.
I think that's all fake news because
that's true. It's true.
I heard that it was part of the American SEAL team who was coming here to get Afrikaners.
It was a SEAL team. If you unzip it, there are 6 SEAls inside that big thing.
It's 2 ton. 2 tons that thing weighed. So apparently there was a lot of freaking seals in there.
I like when he came to rest on the cop car. He's like, puts his head up on the bonnet, just chilling out. That was hilarious.
I thought he was going to hump that car for a second.
That's what I was thinking too. But couldn't he have done this a few days sooner? I was in Gordons Bay, driving right by that very spot several times, just about a week and a half ago. Could he have been there when I was there? That would have a great story, man. Anyway, so much for the elephant seal, but for that lighthearted moment. Yikes.
But it's very concerning that there's this constant need to bail stuff out, because it's, at some point in time you have to understand that the state is inept. I mean, I know this, you know this, but there's a more moral argument against acknowledging the ineptness of the state, and that is, I know you're well read, so I'm going to ask you a question I know you know the answer to, but do you know the story of World War II, why more Jews died in the Netherlands or were put into concentrations in the Netherlands than any other country?
Well, the Dutch turned them all in. I mean, is that the point you're going after, or is it a different point?
And why did they turn them all in?
Okay, I'll give. Why did they turn them all in?
Because the Dutch actually had a rule where you actually had to declare on property titles what your religion was.
Oh, yeah. That's how they were able to turn them all in. Okay, not why, but how they were able. Yeah. So
nobody else had that.
No, so Jews were easily identifiable. It's like, you like firearm owners, you have to register your firearms so they can come get your weapons because they know who's got them. No, okay, that's how they were able to do it. You said why, so I got a little lost there. But yeah, no, the Dutch dimed them all. They dimed them. It's shameful conduct, and they had all the information there. And then, of course, the Nazis could just go collect it from the government source of data because it was all right there. Yep. Did I lose you? Oh, you've gone quiet. I can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, my audio seems to just keep disappearing. But
there it is. You're back. I've got you now. I got you. That was odd. Anyway, yeah, that was weird. I don't know if it's your end or my end. It could have been my end. Who knows? But yeah, no, it's
probably mine.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Well, it's South Africa, so we'll blame it on South Africa.
I'd like to say load shedding, but I don't. Looking outside, there isn't any.
There's no load shedding.
But yeah, the reality is that story in itself should remind you why you shouldn't put all your faith in the state. Like the state, there's a very known phrase, and that is, how much do you trust your government? And most people say, well, they don't. And then you're like, well, then why are you giving them all the power to do everything? Like,
exactly.
Are you stupid?
Why do you trust them to do the right thing when you know they're not going to do the right thing? That's just it's that's a definition of stupidity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. It really is.
I completely agree, but it's difficult. It's difficult to understand what the logic behind this constant fascination of giving the state all the responsibility over every aspect in South African life. It's not like they actually have a proven track record, and they constantly have to bail these people out. And it's tiresome at this point, to be frank, because they have real life consequences. We've just discussed how many just in this short amount of time. We've got grey listing, we've got access to airspace, we've got freaking chicken, dude. Like, the government needs to change tack, but it's disappointing when you see Cyril come back and you're like, doubles down on everything that's made the place worthless in the first place.
100%. Marius Venter said, and I assume you're of British descent, Byron, who placed all the Boers in concentration camps. Well, Marius, Byron is not responsible for the actions of people 100 years ago, any more than I'm responsible for the actions of people 100 years ago, or you are. I mean, that's an unfair question. Yes, he is of UK origin, if I'm not mistaken.
Can I actually address that for 1 second?
Sure.
And that is, I love your enthusiasm for Boers in concentration camps, but I got two things to say to you on that front. The first is, my father is from Scotland, as in his family line.
Yeah, they were kind of oppressed by the English for a long time.
They were Highlanders who had their land stolen by the English for attempting to say that the English should give them their own land, also known as Scotland. And my mother's line, my great-grandmother, died in a concentration camp called Auschwitz. So when you talk about concentration camp, what I would politely ask is for you to be a little bit polite, because in my family, it's a little bit more closer to the truth than probably yours. So please understand. I know you're trying to be smart and clever, but it's a bit personal.
Yeah, no, it's the question's a bit unfair. That's why I mentioned it, because it was put in the chat there. Not attacking Marius, but I mean, it's listen. Things are much more complicated than people like to make them out. You know, South Africans are South Africans, and this focus on the days of Delaware and the concentration camps is really something that Afrikaners need to. You know, they're going to be angry with me, but not say move on from. But you're South Africans. Let's work together. Let's work together, and it's that's just something that needs to happen. Anyway, yeah. So
it's digital forest since Emma of Jewish descent. In short, yes, because most Jewish individuals come from the mother's line. Well, my father was a Roman Catholic. He was born a Roman Catholic and never really practiced. So.
Oh, there you go. I'm a Viking. That hasn't changed. Not Roman Catholic, although I had ancestors who were Irish or Roman Catholic. I'm not Roman Catholic. Yeah, anyway, Sonia Geyer just gave a 350 Rand super chat. Thank you for that, Sonia. I think there was a super chat earlier. I might have missed it. My apologies for that. To be safe, are you back? It looks like you're back. I see you in the chat there. And Cheetah Chick loves you, Byron, from a full-bred Burgermeissie. Whoa, I see. So wait a second. I'm the one been trying to find Burgermeissie, and Byron comes on our program, and the Burgermeissie are chatting him up. That is uncalled for. I'm just going to say it right now. But seriously. So, I mean, look,
my wife will not be happy with that comment. So
I wasn't going to mention that. So his wife is very lovely. I've met her. So, listen, nothing's changed. It's just doubling down, more of the same in South Africa, and a lot of people are curious what's going to come. What is Trump going to do something? And we've seen no indications. Strange thing on this side, you know, the White House and the staff around the chief of staff is Susie Wiles she's pretty much in control. But normally in any White House, when a meeting like this takes place, leaks come out invariably within hours or days. It's been 8 days. We've heard nothing from anybody on the Trump side about what happened behind closed doors. Nothing. That's unusual. And I don't know how to read that. Does that mean the hammer's coming, or I don't know. But it's definitely different than the norm in D.C.
So one of your chats, Mr. Muller, says that he has Polish blood, so he hears me. So interesting thing, just as he's doing it as a segue there, he's asked about that. My actual great-grandmother's from Prussia, so it was actually from what's now parts of northern Poland and southern Germany. It's territories there are a little bit fluid, but it's terrible to actually go around some parts of Poland and see the actual neighborhoods that were Jewish prior to World War II that now have 0 Jews in them. But all the heritage is still there, like on all sides of the buildings and stuff. It's you want to see demographic change, Poland's a really good place to see it.
Absolutely. The Jews and the Germans are almost completely wiped out. There's less than 5,000 Jews left in Poland today, and there's probably about 600,000 ethnic Germans who all speak Polish and are only ethnic German from their surname and the fact that they might be Lutheran or Roman Catholic still to this day, but Roman Catholic from a German church. They were largely forcibly assimilated. 13 million Germans were expelled from the east, including Preußen, Schlesien, and Pommern. And it's just you look at Belarus and all the Jews that were exterminated, removed from there. I mean, the actress who plays Phoebe Cates on Friends, her ancestry goes back to Belarusia, and showing what happened there. It's horrific. I mean, you know what happened in the Second World War, the Nazis at Babi Yar, and look, the pogroms by the Ukrainians, the Russians, the Poles, the Latvians over the centuries. It's pretty horrific what the Jewish people have endured over the centuries. I'm not sure how we got in the Jewish conversation, but it's pretty sad. People that don't know history.
Well, it's in the chat, so
some
people are jumping
asking about
on that topic.
Yep.
Yeah. So, if I may, just respond to your chats and just engage with your chats a little bit here because people are asking. So one person says, Inkwell Odyssey, whoever you are. You said, so given the state of things now, do you not see any positive change? So, Inkwell, I'd actually like to address you to the fact why as to why at the moment I feel like I'm getting frustrated a little bit with with YouTube in general, because if you go a little bit further up your chat, you'll see that there's an individual in the chat who basically says that it's obvious that I want people. So here he is, Flux says what does come across, Byron, is that you prefer to have people stay, but we all know that you have a way to escape, easy to talk, but it does come through in your discourse. And so we have two individuals here wanting two different things. I have Flux telling me that basically what he's saying, I'm paraphrasing, this place sucks, I should wish everybody to leave. And I don't. He's 100% correct. I don't want people to leave. And then I have Inkwell saying, don't I see any positives? Well, yes, I must see positives because that's why I live here. And the other individual, Flux, is 100% correct. I have choices. I have other passports. I have 4. I know that's what you want to know. I have 4, and I still choose to live here because South Africa is still a great place to live. It's still a great place for all of its faults. And obviously, I still feel hopeful that the country will do something. I don't know what. But, that's why we do YouTube, because we wish to expose things and apply pressure on the states and put it on political actors and hope the right people see things and put the pressure where it's supposed to be. And why do we do that? Because we want to raise our kids here. And we want to raise our kids because we see some form of positive in the place that we live. So to answer both questions, it's very difficult to juggle the needs of two people. Because as YouTubers, we're people in ourselves, and so all we can do is tell you our own perspective. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to agree with it. It's just my perspective or Chris's perspective. I'm sure Chris thinks where he lives is great. I might not think that if I went there. Who knows? I don't know.
Well, you'd be wrong, but that's okay. You're welcome to be wrong. So on that note, someone just said, where was it at? Said that I'm surprised at how many people have Jewish heritage here. So many people saying they have Jewish heritage. Wow. But someone said that the U.S. is not utopia. I'm staying. Well, the U.S. is utopia. You haven't lived here, have you? But that's your choice. That doesn't mean it's paradise on earth. We all have problems in every country, but it sure as hell beats the problems that South Africa has right now. And the opportunity is boundless here. 4% unemployment. Anyone can become a success here if they want. But just the refugee asked just a question: if something has achieved at the Oval Office, making this project obsolete, with the refugees that were in the first group be returned, as then it would seem no need for the program. As I've said many, many times, and I've answered this in questions, but I'll do it here since the question came up. People who come to the United States with refugee status will not be returned to their point of origin, to their original country, unless and until the conditions that caused them to flee have been ameliorated. If anyone thinks that the ANC is going to remove 140 plus race-based laws, please tell me, and when that's going to happen. So they're never coming back. The only way that people will come back, which is highly unlikely, is if that happens, if they return of their own volition, which seems unlikely, or if they've committed fraud against the United States to gain the refugee status. And even in that case, seldom are they sent back, because oftentimes refugees come from war-torn countries. We're not going to dump them there. We'll simply prosecute them and put them in prison on this end. So they're not coming back. The Liberians came to America in 1990 on a special 3-year permission to be here. They're still here 35 years later. Refugees don't go home. That's why they're not refugees. They have refugee status, but once they arrive, they're basically immigrants once they're here. So they're not coming back. And no, if the Democrats get in charge, they can't send them back. You don't have your refugee status rescinded. It's governed by law. The Immigration Nationality Act of 1980 governs all this activity. It doesn't matter. Any senile Biden or Jasmine Crockett that takes over the White House or Ilhan Omar cannot change that. The people being deported do not have that status. They were illegally given temporary refugee status or temporary asylum status, which violates U.S. law, by the Biden regime. Those people are being removed after the pedophiles, the murderers, and the rapists are being removed, who are here illegally. We just had a cadet, which I'll cover in my news broadcast after this, who was killed by these idiot illegal Venezuelan immigrants who came to this country. So, no, they're not going home. They're never going home. And yes, guess what? More people are coming. And I'll tell you after they've arrived, because we're not jeopardizing their security. Sorry about that, Byron. It was necessary to cover that.
That's right. So EMR says that she has, or he, she, whoever it is, has 2.5% Ashkenaz Jew.
And Danish ancestry, too.
and Danish ancestry, and then which actually stands to reason because the Ashkenaz comes from the Scandinavian area. Dana says that their grandmother was from Prussia, and then I think it's supposed to say that she's Ashkenaz, but possibly the spelling is wrong. And it's very curious that there's quite a few people here that basically say that they're part of it, that they've got some form of Jewish lineage. I actually just want to talk very quickly about the Ashkenaz bloodline for those of you who don't know anything about it, because it's very fascinating. It's if you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, just start checking that out. Anyway, the reality of it is that apparently the story, whether you buy the story or not, that's up to you. The story was that in 70 AD, when the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed,
sacked by the Romans. Yeah.
Sacked by the Romans. Remember, they were then expelled in 138. 138, the Romans were like, we're sick of these people, get out. And they expelled them, and they renamed the territory to Palestine because the Jews there's historical enemies with the Philistines, and so it was basically a FU to them. Well, a lot of people also don't know is that
the Romans, the Romans gave them the bugger off bunny.
And what was very interesting is that in order to really stick it to them, they actually built a temple to one of their gods on where the original temple was, the second temple. Anyway, the story was when all the Jews that were there went into the diaspora. So diaspora usually means a land that's not of your own. It's not your homeland, if you will, your motherland. So when Afrikaners go to America, they'll be living in the American diaspora, just to give you an idea of how the terms work. So when they went into the diaspora, there were a tribe that went through into Scandinavia. And the Scandinavian tribe were what we now call modern Ashkenaz. And the Ashkenazis weren't actually allowed to intermix with others. Now, they didn't actually want to mix with anybody else because they considered themselves to be different themselves. And so the actual bloodline of the Ashkenaz is actually really, really concentrated, like super concentrated, to the point where it's like, no, if you're part of that group, you're part of it and you'll show up in DNA. So when the person says that they have 2.5%, that's not even questionable. Like, that bloodline was so strong that's why they can actually adequately identify. No other religion on the planet will go, well, that's a Sunni Muslim. Like, you won't find that on any DNA test anywhere, but you will with Ashkenaz because that bloodline was super strong.
Well, one example of that, let me interrupt for just a second. Sorry, Byron. One example of that, of course, is that for decades, centuries, people said the Cohens were all closely related, anyone with the Cohen name, the Cohenim. And in fact, when they did the DNA, that's exactly what they found out. All these people were very closely related, correct?
Correct. So the idea, anyway, from what you're saying there, if you have 2% and you've got it in a DNA test, then welcome to the brotherhood, my friend. You're part of the lineage, and it's not debatable. People in your family might not want to know that, but that bloodline is super strong.
Well, it's interesting because my grandmother's name was Ospelmeyer. It's an uncommon surname. It comes from northern Germany. And when I was waiting for my DNA results, when I first did this early on, a lot of people said, oh, that sounds Jewish. What do you do if you have Jewish ancestry? I said, well, then I'll have just another interesting line to follow. There's a long history there. They weren't Jewish. They were ethnic German. But it's so, whatever. I mean, that doesn't change who I am. It just makes the history that came before me more interesting, potentially. That's how I look at it. So, I mean, I could look like this and have a grandparent who's black. My dentist is nearly as pink as I am, and his grandmother is from Ghana. She's as black as on my microphone here. She's that dark, and he is as white as I am, and that's his grandmother, not his great-great-grandmother. DNA is a funny thing, how it works out.
Very much so, and like I said, the actual Ashkenaz DNA is very, very fascinating. Now, if you really want to go down a real rabbit hole and have a look to see if anything is worthwhile, when I did my DNA tests, I did 2 of them, I came up with a very small percentage as being from Ethiopia.
Well, there were Jews in Ethiopia.
Wait,
am I getting ahead of the story? Sorry.
And I was like, what the freak? Like, Ethiopia? Like, maybe it's my nose or something. I don't know. So I was like, Ethiopia? Okay, cool. So anyway, I checked into it, and that some person gave me an explanation of this. So there's a story in Solomon's temple that the Queen of Sheba went to Ethiopia because she went to go meet Solomon. And interestingly enough, there is a story in Ethiopia that she got freaky with Solomon and actually had a child. And when she went back to Ethiopia, she actually had the child there. And the child was called Solomon II. And he was the ruler of Ethiopia, right? And so that's where the suggestion of some of the Ashkenaz DNA making its way to Ethiopia comes from. If you buy that story, I don't know, but that's the story anyway.
Yeah, there you go. Yikes. Now, of course, someone's saying Ashkenazi Jews adopt European names, particularly German names, because to avoid persecution, that sort of thing. But I mean, some of the names are just obvious dead giveaways, like Goldstein. There aren't really many Germans with the name Goldstein, even though it means goldstone. But anyway, yikes.
Yeah.
All right, so
good. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because obviously with my great-grandmother, she had a Jewish name, and actually what actually happened is that when they came to Africa, the regulations and the laws in Africa were so shite that you could basically rename yourself and get lost in the system. So a lot of people did actually rename themselves, and they gave themselves like really cliche surnames like Water, so that they weren't actually, because a lot of them were very identifiable by the surnames. So you may find that you have Ashkenaz DNA in you, but actually you look at your surname or something like that, and you've got like a very distinctly Afrikaans surname. You're like, what the hell happened there? Well, you'd be surprised at how many people change their surnames in order to hide from persecution.
Yeah, and what this proves in this whole conversation, all the comments come from people about their origins and their heritage, is that bigotry and racism against people is just stupid, because most people are mongrels. Everybody's a mix, and it's just stupid to hold prejudice against people based on their ethnicity and origin. Anyway, that's where I'm at. That's my position on it, and I won't change that. So, Byron, any final thoughts? We wrap up here, and then I've got my news program after this.
No, not at all. I thought it was just a random chat between two friends, I suppose.
Yeah, we did talk about the White House meeting a little bit. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. So,
one person asked me if I have kids. Just to answer that question, 3. That's why I always look like tired.
He's Irish Catholic. Now we know. Well, there's a stereotype right there. Unfortunately, it's true. My mother was one of 13 kids. One of 13. Wow. My grandmother was busy for a long time, to say the least. My youngest aunt was only about 4 years older than me. She passed away, unfortunately, in the 1980s, but she was only 4 years older than me. So, wow, my grandmother was busy for a long, long time. Anyway, all right, well, Byron, thanks. We'll chat. We'll do Braai Brews again when we get a chance, but thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure having this conversation with you. It's nice compared to some conversations, because I can actually have a conversation with someone that thinks and reads, and I always enjoy that.
What are you reading at the moment, by the way?
Well, at that Taking Midway. That and about 4 other books. I usually read about 4 or 5 books, but I've focused for the past several days on the Taking Midway because it's really well written. Martin Dugard. He's the guy that does the series with Bill O'Reilly, the killing Lincoln, killing this, killing that, and he did these on his own, Taking Midway. So it's about the Midway campaign, but it goes all the way back in the history of Midway, which is interesting. I didn't know. I actually learned something from the book that is useful. The Midway was one of those guano islands. It's a Pacific atoll, but it was all the guano was there from the millions of albatross defecating for millennia, just like the islands off the coast of Namibia and elsewhere around the world. Of course, Alexander Humboldt, is the one who discovered guano, and the nitrogen, and it became fertilizer. I did some research on something else a couple of years ago and discovered something that was quite disturbing. A lot of people don't know this, but after the guano islands around the world were mostly cleared off all the bird dung that had been piled up for millennia, so that fertilizer source, which fueled population growth in Europe in the 19th century, once that stuff dried up after at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, what they did is these companies went through and they dug up the remains of Napoleonic dead from the Napoleonic Wars who died in Europe and Belgium and France, and they ground up their bones. And that was the fertilizer they used to grow food in England and in Belgium and in France for decades before we came up with rock phosphate and then petroleum based. Anyway, so that's the history of fertilizers, in case you didn't know it.
It's quite horrendous. They're using actual bones. It's fascinating, but,
but
I can see the logic. I can see how that would work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get the logic too, but I mean, that's talk about disrespectful, and not just that, but I don't want to eat the bones of eat fruit that was grown with the bones of dead soldiers, but that's what they did. Anyway, so yeah, but I'm reading Taking Midway and a few other things right now, but I'm trying to finish that one up the next day or so, but I've had a busy schedule. It's a good book. Martin Dugard is an entertaining author.
I'm just busy reading at the moment the Douglas Murray's new book.
Okay.
On October 7th.
Well, that should be interesting. I haven't seen that one come out. That must have been recent arrival.
Give it a look. I've been trying to get actually an interview with Douglas Murray on the book, but he's so difficult to track down. I've actually got his number, but trying to get a date with him is terribly difficult.
I've never had a conversation with him, so yep. But anyway, all right. Well, Byron, once again, that's good pleasure. You take care, and folks, I'll wrap up here. And if you hang around, you'll be here for the news, which will start in about 4 minutes, about 15 minutes late because we ran over on this one. But it was great conversation. Thanks for the Ashkenazi history. Appreciate it. Cheers.
All right.
All right, folks. Byron Shepard from Morning Shot there, and that's going to wrap it up for this stream. Hang tight. In about less than 4 minutes, we'll be live with the news. I'll be right back. And I've got the news. So if you've got refugee questions, please don't come in the news. I got to get through the news because I have a dental appointment at 8 p.m. South Africa time at 2 p.m. my time. So I'm going to have to diddy-mow out of here after a little over an hour of the news. So let me get through the news, and then you can save your questions for after that if you don't mind. You can chat with each other while I'm doing the news if you want. All right. Thanks a lot. Be sure to hit the like button, and I do appreciate it. And we'll catch you guys here shortly in about 3 minutes or less. All right. Just enough time to run to the loo, get something to drink. All right, everybody. Cheers. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you shortly. I got Zoom in the wrong place. I got to turn Zoom off, then put on my closing credits.